I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I'm going to ask one person to do our prayer before we get started. Do that, Lucio?
Lord, thank you for this beautiful evening, and thank you for this good company that we have assembled here today. Please help this country in the upcoming elections, and please protect our service forces overseas and help them get home safe. And help this evening and its information that we share with each other today. Help this country in the coming elections. In God's name we pray. Amen.
Thank you so much. So if you're on the panel, please come on up and we'll get started. Okay, Fu, Pega, Wendy, yeah. See the Baroness, if she's coming up, yeah. Okay, so while the panelists are coming up, I just want to lay out a few things here. What we're going to do is each panel's going to say their name. They're going to say where they came from, a little story about their background. And I know it's hard to do because it's your life story sometimes. But what we like to do is get some baseline of your backgrounds and all that. And the objective here is not allow the panel to kind of talk to you. I hope that the way we do this is allows you to ask questions and have a discussion, because we need to learn something about why socialism is bad, why communism is bad. And I can tell you that a lot of times when we talk about socialism or communism, there are a lot of bad things that happen. That's why we're here. And so sometimes it's very difficult to talk about the bad things because we're in front of the public or we're in front of children. But there's a lot of terrible things that happen when you live under communism or socialism. And so some part of this discussion will be sanitized a little bit, but I hope that you understand why, right? We can go long, we can go hard, we can go some terrible things that happen. People die. And if you want to know what's going on right now as we speak, just look up what the Communist Chinese Party is doing to the Uyghur. Okay, just look that up and see what they're doing, and that's to give you a glimpse of the terrible things the Communist Party can do to you and to other people. Okay, so one thing I want to mention real quick, because I want the panel to talk, is the fact that this election is the most important elections, because based on what we're seeing and hearing today, we're going toward either freedom or communism, straight out communism, Marxism. Forget about socialism. Let's talk about communism. And that's what's coming. Okay, so with that in mind, I'm going to start maybe over here at Pega and maybe spend 3 to 5 minutes. And when you do have a question, so here's one other rules of engagement as well. If you look back, all of us would have some stories to share about the terrible things that happen. If you do, please ask the question quickly, right? And if you have a comment, try to keep it under 2 minutes, because this is about discussion rather than, other situation. So with that in mind, the hardest part first is get the first panelist to talk. But I know that Pega is very good, so I'll start with that. So you can use this mic or you can use that mic, whatever you want.
Let me have the one that you have. That way that they can keep that open.
Yeah, keep that open.
Thank you. I am so glad to see you guys. So I was born in Iran. I was 10 when we left. When I was 7, there was a change in the regime. So the Shah was in power, and we had complete freedom. What you see here is exactly what we had. We were able to socialize, get together, mixed crowds, and in a very quiet manner, the Shah was taken out, and all of a sudden, the Ayatollah was brought in. So, this was all done in the name of God, in the name of Allah. This was all done based on the foundational of religion. As a 7-year-old, I didn't understand exactly why, the details, but I can tell you this. For those of us those families that were not ones to go under, it was very difficult. My father ended up serving time. They barged into our house. We were in the military, so they gave them complete control. They broke into literally came into our house and searched our house and took whatever was against the law in their eyes. And what was against the law in the new regime and the new government was poker cards and playing dice, pictures of us in bathing suits, rock and roll music, alcohol. Before that, we had the freedom to have guns. He took my father's guns that he had the right to have and used it against him, threw him in jail. He served for 6 months. He was finally let out, and when he got out, we left. The borders were closed. My family had worked here in the United States, had worked for us, my mother to have the right to work here. She had a visa. So we were able to be here. We had the right to be here, but we weren't allowed to leave the country. The borders were closed. So when the conversations took place about the border of the states, there's 2 sides to that. Borders are to keep people in or keep people out. And that particular border was to keep people in. And if you didn't listen, you were definitely forced to live the new lifestyle. As a 7-year-old, I got word that our neighbors next door, they had a little girl that was my age. I was there when they got the news when they decided to make an example of her father. They drug him behind a car and they left his body at his mother's house. This is like, things that you see on TV here. This is Hollywood stuff. That was our real life. They literally murdered people to make an example of them so that others would listen, so they can make sure that they got what they wanted. We left. It's funny. I'm looking at the scenery here. That was the mountains. We left on horseback through the mountains into Turkey. The Kurds were smuggling people out because they had no land, so they were able to come and go. We left on horseback from village to village. We traveled at night, and I could tell you detailed stories about this what a 10-year-old could process riding on horseback through the night, through the mountains, when you couldn't even see your hand in front of your eyes. It was not easy. As we actually crossed the border, there were guard stands on top of the mountains. And when there was noise that they could hear, clearly they were uneasy. There was a moment in time where they took the horses around one side of the mountain and they took us around the other side, because if the horses made noise, then the guards wouldn't clue into the fact that we were there. My brother was 7. He started to cough, and I don't know if this was a nervous cough or what. My mother put her hand over his mouth to cover it, and we literally hit the ground. And she had to literally watch him squirm as she was holding him from breathing so that he wouldn't give up the fact that we were there. And the guard knew. He shot a couple of bullets up in the air, or so I assumed, and we stayed still for a couple of minutes. And then we got up when it got quiet and proceeded to go. It was so dark you could literally not see your hand in front of your face. Towards the tail end of this, my mother said, we better hustle, because the Kurds spoke broken Turkish. My mother speaks Turkish as well, so she could understand. They were getting further and further ahead of us. What happens when you go from village to village to village, they take a little bit of money out of your pot. And so towards the tail end of the journey, you're there's not as much money in the pot. They ended up stealing my uncle's camera, so we have no pictures of any of this. We had to hustle and stay to make sure that we were within a year's distance, because if they took off, the horses knew how to get back to home. They knew the route, so that we would literally be left. Now, there were a number of people, I heard stories about a number of people getting left. My uncle got left. So they could literally leave you completely. And the minute you got off the horse went back to the village and you're left. So, we were lucky. All we had was, we had just camera and a little bit of money stolen from us. But I will never forget the night that we came over that last mountain and I saw the lights into Turkey. There is a feeling of freedom that could never be conveyed when you leave a country like that and when you know what you're coming to. What we fail to understand, and I will make sure my child doesn't miss this, is that this is absolutely the last country that allows people to live like this. If we don't fight for our Constitution, if we don't fight for our rights, shame on us, because it will be taken. The war is right here. It is at our feet. And the minute that you think, oh, that will never happen, they will never do that. Yes, they will. Yes, they will. If they have to get to the point where they drag people behind cars to make examples of them, to leave their dead bodies outside to make sure that the rest of the population understands what they mean when they are serious, they will do that. Don't question it. So when you think, oh, well, it's not a big deal, I'm too shy to talk to that one individual, I can't change this person's mind, they're way beyond my help, they're too liberal, or they don't understand. Lifetime friends, family, you need to talk to them about this, because we could truly lose this country, and then we have nowhere to go. We don't have the ability to leave through mountains and go to another nation. That option isn't there. This is it. So, don't ever question the evil that is capable of taking our freedom, because all they want is control. I appreciate you guys coming out. I'll be happy to answer any questions later.
Hi, my name is Flown Stecker, and I was born in Vietnam. My family left 40 years ago last week. We left about 2 days after the Lunar New Year, that's around January, February. It happened that year, it was the middle of February. We left at that particular time because that was easy enough for us to use an excuse of going to another town for entertainment. We snuck out at the bottommost point of Vietnam, which stuck out in the ocean, so that from that point any other place would be a little closer. Our goal was to go to Malaysia. So let me just kind of take back a few years prior to that. When we left, I was close to 10 years old and didn't have much of an idea of what I was going to leave behind. We knew it was dangerous, but at that age, I was the youngest of 3 kids, and my oldest brother was 17 years old, and was about to be drafted to go fight in Cambodia. Vietnam was hugely involved around the Pol Pot, Khmer Rouge years, and my parents didn't want to have him be drafted and go fight. Most likely will get killed. So they were trying to get him out. I was too young to really understand what we were in for, but I knew it was dangerous. My parents took a couple of bags for our family of 5, and then there was also my uncle, my dad's younger brother, who was in his middle 20s. I didn't understand what I was leaving behind. And looking back, was the best decision my parents ever made. Sorry. I mean, 40 years later, I can still feel this emotion. My family was part of the boat people, if you've ever heard about that. We escaped by sea. There were people leaving from land, going over to Cambodia and Thailand, which is actually was just as dangerous because you're in the wilderness, and if you don't have enough, the guide that could lead you and not abandon you, you're just as good as dead. We went by boat. And my dad had served the previous government. The day the communists took over the South, North Vietnam fought and won the South, and they came to our house. My dad had stationed out. He had one of the regions along the Mekong River. But about a couple months before the fall of Saigon, we had moved back. My parents bought a house in Saigon, in the city. We moved back. And when they took over, they were marching down the street. And we had one of the main streets down in the middle of town. They stopped to rest in front of our house. And so, out of courtesy, my parents invited them to stay, and just to sit, trying to keep it peaceful, and said, to bring them drinks, water. And funniest thing is they looked in our house and saw the range where we were cooking, and was amazed that, wow, you can cook and listen to the radio down at the bottom. That was the oven. They were so backward. These people were young people in the, propaganda in the communist society is tremendous. They were told that we were desperate in the South, that they need to come and rescue us. So these guys were gung-ho, they were so happy they won, and they came into the South and they realized, oh my goodness, all these people with the life of luxury, it wasn't like how they felt, how they lived it out there. So it was all a lie. And so what did they do? They took the men, the breadwinners of the families, whoever was involved in the previous regime, in the civilian life or in the military life. My dad was in the military. He was part of the Navy, but he was along the coast, the river coast guards, kind of like the Coast Guard. But if you were involved and had a job, a good job in the previous government, they consider you the elites. So they had to book you, put you away, called it the re-education camp. And what did they want to re-educate you with? Propaganda. Communism propaganda. And also to make you pay the price of working with the previous government. They got doctors, lawyers, monks. Can you believe it? My dad was lucky. He only spent the 3.5 years in re-education camp. Concentration camp, I would say. He told stories of people getting sick because they didn't have a lot of nutrients in their nutrition in their food. Meat was the little square like this in a month. I'm sorry, a week. And then like sugar was a little, like think about those little squares you put in your coffee in a month. They were desperate for sugar. People had not enough to eat, and then their eyes failed them. So what they do, they go and give him a little shot in the eye and made the guy blind. And then they would want to execute whoever they was talking against, what they were teaching or rebellious. They put you out there on speakers, have a fake trial, and execute you right out loud, just to set an example for everybody else. I have a lot of little stories that my dad still tells me. But when we left, I knew it was dangerous, but I didn't know what we were leaving. We left everything. We got 2 bags for the entire family of 5. And by boat, fortunately my dad was trained in the Navy, so he had researched his path. of how to get to, and it was a longer story behind how we got the whole family out. It was intended to be just my brother to get out so that he can avoid the draft. The first night was stormy. It was the day, New Year's Day. New Year's celebration, third day. So everybody was drunk. All the guards were drunk. They weren't paying attention. So we snuck out quietly. But then we got hit by a big storm that night. Of course, everybody was sick. Fortunately, my dad was used to being at sea, so he was okay. He managed to navigate us through. First night, we saw ships, that huge merchant ships that, with lights lit up from far away, signal. They got closer and they decided they were going to leave. Because I think they realized that these are refugees they didn't want to spend time with. So they stretched away from us further and further. Second night, we almost got attacked by the Thai fishing boat nearby. They had thrown their anchor over to our ship and was about to jump over. My mom, actually, she came here today. I remember there was a little cabin at the top with all the ladies and children. I was the next oldest. The little one was the 3-year-old boy, son of the person that owned that ship, that boat. She told me to pray, and I remember praying. Praying for what? I'm not sure, but I'm just praying to get us over whatever this is coming. I remember looking out at the cracks between this boat, the wood board, and feeling the warmth of their fishing lights shining on us, and you can hear the commotion. They were very excited. They wanted to jump over. They were about to jump over, but minutes before that, my dad had called up and signaled. Apparently, the organizer, the owner of that boat, had prepared some knives and katanas and machetes and things like that just for our defense. They took them out. Every guy who was willing took one of the weapons and stood there on guard. And I think when they came close enough to see us, they realized we were ready to defend, and they just took off. I remember looking out at the cracks, feeling the warmth and wondering what's going to happen next, because all I heard growing up those last few years were people leaving and they get attacked, they get raped, they get, assaulted, all sorts of crazy things happen. So I remember feeling that light just turned off, and their voices started to get faint. They just left. Apparently we scared them. So, and the next morning, my dad signaled and called us because he saw land. And it was small villages at first. And he didn't want to go there because we heard stories that they would push you back out because they weren't willing to help because they're poor, neighborhoods. So he started sailing the coast a little bit more, and as the houses got bigger and bigger, and now he starts to see commercial buildings, right? He decided that was going to be where we landed. So he rammed that boat so hard, it broke apart when we were all trying to move out off the boat, took our belongings up to the beach. Little did we know, some soldiers came out, Malaysians. We landed in Malaysia just as he planned for us to go. I think the city was Terengganu in Malaysia. A couple of soldiers came out, robbed us first. They wanted to know whose bags or where, all families, all separated. They couldn't speak to my dad in English, so they told him to put aside our stuff. He told them that he was fleet trained by the Americans in San Diego the year I was born. So and then he presented his numbers associated with the Navy. And so they were like, oh, okay, so get your family over here. They left us alone, pretty much, robbed everybody else. These 2 or 3 guards came out and did this. And then they went back and signaled for the rest of the authorities. Well, guess what? We were right behind the International Red Cross office. And they came out, gave us health checkups, and got some paperwork started, and they shipped us over to an island that was reserved for Vietnamese refugees. We were there, fortunately, for about 7 months, and then another month in a camp near Kuala Lumpur, so that we can have our health checks ready to go. And then we came over here, and I remember that feeling of, well, first of all, when we got help and we knew there was International Red Cross there, we knew that was a good sign. Like Peggy said, it was that feeling of freedom, and like not really sure what, but I remember getting so excited because I was gonna be able to see my grandmother, who left at the fall of Saigon, and walking through the markets of this island, that it was a small economy established with a bunch of refugees who were able to bring, you know, their money, and they were able to communicate with the Malaysian Chinese, and the, you know, Chinese was apparently the common language that they could trade with them. And they created this little micro economy on the island itself. And I remember walking along the street to go to our little area where they told us we can stay, smelling apples. We don't have a lot of apples in Vietnam, but the smell of the fruits, the markets nearby, it was just people having their little tent, and then they traded with the Malaysians, so they had food, canned foods and things like that. I remember feeling that smell and how sweet it was. It was like the smell of freedom and what the best thing to come. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to see my grandmother, and I'm going to be in America. And realizing that I was close to feeling like I was going to go to heaven, because America was heaven in my mind. And I'm sorry, it's so emotional. 20 years later, and I was trying to tell myself I shouldn't do this, but every time I talk about this story, I cry. But the whole process for us to come to America, of course you need some sponsorship, so we had family members. But it was expected. We never complained. You know, all these people complaining about being in cages, that's just for convenience there. And it was heaven compared to what we came from. Food was rationed. My mom reminded me last night, she said our family had a kilo of rice that they pass out for, I guess it depends on how many members in your family, and wheat flour or noodles. But other than that, you're on your own. They try to give you something, but you're on your own. Everything else is on the black market. And I thought about these past few months, you know, how toilet tissue was premium. You can't find, you know, disinfectant wipes without, you have to be like one of the seniors who can shop early in the morning at Costco or something to be able to get that. But it just reminded me of what we went through, and this is a start, and how fast it fell. In our minds, we were okay with that. We were willing to accept that. We shouldn't accept that. It shouldn't be this easy, I bet you. The Democrats, the liberals, the leftists, whatever, the Marxists, the people who are up there scheming this stuff, and I really believe they planned it, they probably never thought that it was going to be this easy. And they made us accept this. The other day I heard a commercial on the radio about how you should be wearing your mask to be respectful of people. It wasn't about, you know, protecting your health anymore. It's about respecting other people. And you're conforming to it now. They go out, but Julia was telling me earlier, she went to school, she just started college, and they tell you to distance yourself, and if you don't, they chastise you. They're conditioning you to accept this. And they beat it on you until everybody would do it, or if you don't do it, they shame you in public. I watched this happening at a Costco near me. The guy was railing off at this woman because she had her face mask down while she was drinking a shake. Why do we let this happen? You know, the logic isn't there anymore. I'm telling my kids growing up, I'm telling them about all these stories, my experience when I was growing up. I told them, this is it. This is the last country we can run to for freedom. Where else are we going to go? Europe? You know, I talked to some of my friends and they're like, oh, the socialism that we're thinking about, I mean, it's not the socialism where you came from. It's like the Europeans. Yeah, really? Have you looked at them? They come over here. I have some coworkers coming over here and I was amazed at the abundance. We took them to Costco. We always do that to the visitors. Take them to the big box stores, right? And they're like, are you serious? This is like 20 years ago, I guess. The first impression I had was the guy went into the Costco and saw, you know, the bins of photos when you have them developed, and they throw them into this bin, and you're supposed to go out there and, you know, sort through and figure out your package. The guy looked at me wide-eyed. You guys put all your pictures out in public like this? Anybody can come and take anything? I told him, yeah. Yeah, we're a little trusting. But this is America. I don't think you will ever see this sort of freedom anywhere else. I go to Europe for a month. I come back. I almost want to drop to the floor and kiss the floor where I landed in the airport. It was nice. I was there. I was visiting friends. You know, France and Germany. It wasn't like, you know, one of those Eastern European countries or anything like that. But looking back, I was like, wow, I have to get out to come back and appreciate even more of what I had. So anyway, I'm taking up a lot of time here, but this is it. I tell my kids, where are we going to run next? Nowhere else. This is the heaven that we're living now. We need to appreciate it. So anyway, thank you.
Just before we continue on with the other speakers, first of all, it's my bad. We have a lot of food over here, so it's my fault to skip out on that. So this is for you, so please come over and let's take about 3 to 5 minute break if you don't mind, so people can grab food. So, and then